He's up at Harvard and has been there for a long time. Very active, a writer. But this is the thing that he's come up with, theory of multiple intelligences. How many of you are aware of this? I keep saying not enough. This is a central, oh, good, you got his hand up there. This is a central theory in sort of modern approach to education. And what Gardner began to surmise from a lot of his research is that a lot of the way we teach is just really out to lunch. And that's him. He deals with these things, and it's interesting because you looked at the list that I made of Herbert Simon. It's interesting the crossovers. You get a lot of similarities here. But these are the 8 forms of intelligence, and you know, I get 2 different responses to this. About half the people look at this and say, well, that's obvious. Of course we have a lot of different ways of thinking and doing things. And the other half tend to say, wow, that's really mind-blowing. I never thought about it in that way. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I think there's a lot of what Gardner touches upon here that is relevant to us as designers, as we're designing for people around us. And really the reason I throw him in here, as we're talking about what our relationship to technology is and being honest, is that I think this kind of analysis for most of us is something that we don't ever do. You know whether you're good or bad, you know what you scored on the SAT in mathematics. You know whether you like reading or not. Not enough people read. You know whether you can write, different thing than reading. But we don't interpret the broader world often from enough different perspectives. And one of the things the central thing that Gardner said was if we look at the world around us and if we look at the way we think, young kids as well as adults, this process has helped tremendously by breaking it down into a variety of perspectives. Now, Howard Gardner, I see some of you taking notes, and nothing's wrong with taking notes, but Howard Gardner is a seminal thinker. He's widely respected in the world of education. And you can find, many different writings about his work. And what's interesting as you deal with issues like user experience is you'll find just thinking about a page like this that it comes into play and changes the way that you're looking at designing things. So he's written a lot. This is his most famous book, Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences. This was by no means a theory that was, immediately embraced by everyone. This book is probably about 30 years old now. So his work, he's probably in his early 70s, I'd say late 60s, early 70s. And it came from a couple of decades of different educational research. He's done a lot of different studies on what happens when you put the theory into practice, something we look at a lot here because although we do like to research and write, many of us also like to make things. And he kind of continually comes back to it and is continually looking at the notion of intelligence and what it means. And I bring it up here and I started with Herbert Simon, but I start here with Gardner because I don't think many of us, myself included, look frequently enough, hard enough at what intelligence means. Who are we? How many people here view themselves as intelligent? This is a great question. Raise your hands if you think you're intelligent. So we've got like a quarter of the people in the room who think they're intelligent. Now I would hope 100% of people would say, I'm intelligent. The question is not, are you intelligent, it's how are you intelligent? Everyone in this room should have their hand up because I know that everyone in this room has something that they're proud of in terms of what you're doing, how you do, whatever. It might be because you're a consummate musician, which, may not translate automatically in acing, the GRE and astrophysics, but, we all have something, and that's kind of what he's getting at here. So another thing which crosses over with a lot of the writers here that Gardner has gotten in recently is how does intelligence relate to ethics? He's done a book, which I love, with a couple other collaborators, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and William Damon called Good Work. And this book is really about how does intelligence on one hand translate into people who are doing work to change the world in positive ways. Very few people would argue that Adolf Hitler was dumb. But the question becomes, what caused Adolf Hitler to apply his intelligence in the ways that he did? And I'm not picking on Hitler, but as an example, it's a good one. He really looks at this and says, well, he breaks it down. There are a number of case studies in here. Why is it that some people go out and they actually do really good things? They're selfless. They are dedicated to the betterment of humanity, whereas other people are hanging out down in Wall Street worrying about their bonus check. Now, there's a large gray area in between these, and we're glad when they give us part of their bonus check for our research projects. But it's an interesting extension of the whole intelligence conversation. So fundamentally for me, this bottom line is what I've taken over the years from the multiple intelligences, is that I've always been fascinated by systems. It's one of the reasons that I originally wanted to create the DT program, because I was so tired of reviewing applications for Parsons and having people tell me, well, it's all about the visual and the verbal. This person can write, but they can't draw. This person can draw, but they can't write. This person can do both. And I was like, geez, there must be something else. And not knocking people if you can write and draw or both, but there is, obviously. And you look at programs like transdisciplinary design, it's all about the notion of systems and complexity. I mean, that program wouldn't have existed without the rise of complex systems and the need to solve complex problems. And so this is very much what I take from the multiple intelligences. So that means we're changing to a different person. By the end of this lecture, you too will be able to stand on your fingers. Okay, of the readings that I gave you, the Matthew Crawford is the one that last year generated the most response. It's also in some ways the easiest read, and that's why I'm starting with it. I'm just going to, for each of the readings I've assigned, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I put it forth, why I put forth the reading. In the case of Bill Joy, I'm going to show, if I end up with time, and it doesn't look like the lecture will go 4.5 hours, so I may have time to show 5 minutes of Bill Joy talking. But that's the good-looking Matthew Crawford in front of his vintage. Anyone know what kind of bike that is? You read about it. That's one you should read. If you didn't read the Matt Crawford article, you should go back and read it. Shopcraft. Come on, help me here. Shop class as Soulcraft. This conversation last year went in about 100 different directions. I had people come in and say, well, he's anti-technology, or he's anti-intellectual. In fact, Matthew Crawford is an intellectual. He's a fellow in a think tank. He also runs a motorcycle shop in his spare time or whatever. But, in a way that the text is neither of these things. I'm not going to say what it is. What he's really getting at is the importance for him of accomplishing things through, and I won't even say manual labor, just accomplishing things through going through process of building, of making, of fixing. There's a great quote in the document that I gave you that, actually I'll read it because although I won't normally do this, I will read this. I once accidentally dropped a feeler gauge down into the crankcase of a Kawasaki Ninja that was practically brand new while performing its first scheduled valve adjustment. I escaped a complete teardown of the motor only through an operation that involved the use of a stethoscope, another pair of trusted hands, and the sort of concentration we associate with a bomb squad. When I finally laid my fingers on that feeler gauge, I felt as if I had cheated death. I don't remember ever feeling so alive as in the hours that followed. Now, this is a great quote, and everyone here, in some form or another, can identify with it. What does it say? What it says to me, and this is really just my interpretation, is, and this is kind of dull, it sounds dumb, it's important to do things, to make things real. You know, in his case, he's had the audacity, some people would say, to translate that process of laying the hands-on into intellectual evaluation. And this is a lot what he does in his other writings. But, you know, of all the readings I handed out, and probably the one most of you didn't get through was the Mander in the end. But it's okay, I'll talk about that and why I put it forward. The Crawford will make you think, for those of you who are in making-related programs, and I understand that in terms of design studies, your fundamental intent may not be to make things. For those of you who are in making-related programs, I think just thinking through this, not this quote, but the document itself, can be tremendously useful. One of the interactions I have a lot with first-year grad students is about the importance of them exploring the various facilities that they have access to at Parsons. And it's always sad when you get people in their third or fourth semesters who don't even know what's around them because they've never forced themselves to go over and print something with the 3D printer, or figure out what it would take to cut a piece of wood in the wood shop. It's not very hard, but you do have to go through a couple of hoops to get there. Or even just, you know, how many of you have cut something on one of the laser cutters here at school? Not enough. Not enough. I mean, I'm not sure anyone's raising their hands. I hope by next week you have all done laser cutters. They're all over the place. The laser cutter will change your life. It will. We suffer from this as faculty. It changed our life at some point and we just can't get our minds off it. But, anyway, this article first came out in a very interesting publication called The New Atlantis that you guys should be aware of. It is, in a loose sense, its subtext is a journal of technology and society. There are a lot of very interesting articles in it, some of them predictable, some less so, and they'll pull in people like Matthew Crawford. That article itself, his article is several years old now, but you know, you should go, you will enjoy going to this site, and it's worth browsing, and you will find other articles not necessarily similar to Matthew Crawford, but of relevance to this whole broad conversation, and in fact, to this lecture in general. Crawford did turn this essay into a book, which you can buy. It's less than 200 pages. It's worth reading. It's the same motorcycle on the front as in his other picture. I actually think, and a lot of reviewers have said this, that he kind of made the point in his essay, and it's kind of a commentary on the effectiveness of brevity sometimes. You don't always have to turn things into a book. But if you really like what he's written, if you really identify with some of his thoughts, or it's led you in interesting directions, buy the book, join the New York City Public Library, check it out. How many people are members of either the New York City or the Brooklyn Public Library? Good! I've never asked that before, but libraries are good resources, and you can, of course, buy it online if you want. But, you know, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that it's going to go that much deeper into the topic. One of the questions that gets asked about the Crawford a lot is, well, is he dissing technology? Is he pro-con? And I actually think it's kind of neither. I used this example last year. Alain de Botton, who's a Swiss thinker, also has written in some similar ways. This is his book, The Pleasures and Sorrows of Work. He and Matthew Crawford really write a lot about sort of the philosophy of everyday life. One reference that I made that I'm not going to dwell upon here was to one of the collaborators of Howard Gardner, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who has evolved a theory called flow. How many people have heard of flow? It's actually a highly respected scientific theory now. A lot of people look at it as kind of new agey. But Csikszentmihalyi has also focused a lot on, in his case, what makes us most productive, and this is where he came across this idea of the flow state. But Matthew Crawford, Alain de Botton have both looked at this, and this is another reference in case you want to dig deeper into this and wondering why you like to do things or what you should be doing to be happy or whatever. None of this, and I think I can speak for any of these authors, is about achieving happiness. It's deeper than that, because I think most of us are not naive enough to suggest that the goal is to achieve happiness. We'd all like to be happy as possible, but it all comes with some anger and some sadness built in. So anyway, let's go to Ray Kurzweil. How many have read Ray Kurzweil before or heard of him? Okay, we used to do several weeks around Kurzweil in the Creativity and Computation lecture, and the reason for it is that he is, in terms of optimistic uses of technology, one of the leading thinkers of our time. He's, a huge modern proponent of artificial intelligence and its application to solving social, medical, theoretical problems of any type. This is Kurzweil. He's a research fellow, longtime professor up at MIT, still there. He's become sort of a juggernaut in his own right, so he probably is one of these guys who's at his actual job for about one day a month. But you will recognize the name because, yes, he is the inventor and purveyor of Kurzweil synthesizers. He is a highly successful businessman. He has made millions and millions of dollars from various inventions. And I think, although he now declares himself to be a futurist, really he was known for a long time as an inventor. And very much in the league of someone like Zach Lieberman, who would, I'm not sure Zach would appreciate being compared to Ray Kurzweil or not. He has applied technology to solving problems. He's done a lot of work with reading solutions for the blind, speech synthesis, things like this. So this is a man who's not just a thinker. He makes stuff, and he makes it good. I love pictures like this, which is Ray Kurzweil hanging out with Stevie Wonder, in front of course, the Kurzweil synthesizer, which Stevie Wonder happens to love and use all the time. So, this is a guy who's accomplished, and so a lot of his thought process has come from interaction with the real world. He's written extensively. This is perhaps his most famous book. It's a little dated now, probably 15 years old, The Age of Spiritual Machines. This is really a book about artificial intelligence, about the possibilities. More recently, he's written a book called The Singularity is Near, which in a Sven synopsis is about at what point do we cease not to be any different from the digital technology around us. To be blunt, at what point can we just simply download our consciousness, not worry, live forever? The singularity he's referring to here is humans living forever. And, some of the kooky stories that come out about Kurzweil is, he takes 300 different vitamin pills a day because one of his other books, which I don't think I have a picture of here, is called How to Live Long Enough to Live Forever. And his whole notion is, if we can just live, all you guys are, the Mecca is coming on. You will all live long enough. Clive, myself, we'll see. We're getting there where we've got to edge it out there. But the point is, within 20, 30 years, we'll be able to download our consciousness, and it won't matter. The body, they'll figure out the robotic bodies and all that by that end. But he's heavy into this stuff. I mean, he's really over the top. And he takes 300 vitamin pills a day because he's going to live that long. So you hear these kooky stories about Kurzweil, and a lot of his detractors bring it up, and they just go like, "This guy's insane. What are you talking about?" He's not insane. He's not insane. And this is these are the kind of thoughts that he had, and you would have absorbed some of this from how to build a brain if you read through that. Is our evolution directly linked to that of digital technology? He feels it is without a doubt. And he's not always talking about how do we embed circuits in ourselves. He's talking about human evolution physically, with the exception of our brain, which stopped tens of thousands of years ago, because we began to put more and more pressure on our brain to solve problems instead of our bodies becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And he's added digital technology to that. So that's what he sees as humanity's future. It has pretty great relevance to us as designers. So you read about it, you either decide whether you agree with him or not. His basic supposition is that biological evolution is extremely slow, but digital evolution is quite a bit faster. If you look at the fact that 40 years ago computers basically didn't exist, and now we're having a discussion about at what point are we going to be able to download the human brain or the human consciousness. This is part of what he's touching upon. But the other part of what he's touching upon is that the evolution of digital technology is so fast now that we can't understand where it's going. You look 10 years out, you look 10 years ago, it's very hard to make these jumps. 10 years ago, we might have speculated that we were all carrying around mobile phones. Would any of us have thought what was happening with social networks, or, you know, just I can go down long lists of things we didn't predict. And this is kind of what he's talking about, is the evolution of technology, of digital technology in this case, is moving so rapidly that we don't know where it's going, but we can assume things are going to happen that are way beyond our wildest imagination. And as designers, that's both optimistic and it's not. It depends on how we look at it. This is what I was talking about. Kurzweil has created his own university, the Singularity University. You laugh at this. We've had a number of graduates of our programs go out and attend Singularity University. His point here was, what happens if we bring the most, getting back to intelligence, none of you will qualify